Dallas has all the ingredients it needs to be a progressive city, but it doesn't always come up to be as progressive as it could be. Why do you think that is?
I think we live in Texas. Look at our governor. Look what they're doing. There are places that I have traveled to in the world when I could just be my own natural self, and I felt seen. I felt more alive. But when I come back into the States, as soon as I fly in to DFW, it's like, okay, walls up. Um, so it is my hope that, in the future that changes. But if it doesn't, there's a whole big world out here. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to stay here. The world embraces us. When I was in South Africa, they were like, y'all heroes, y'all heroes. They were just loving me. Everybody wanted to take me out to lunch and everybody wanted to be my friend. When I go to Mexico, same thing. The world loves us. America hates us, but the world loves us.
How do you define art?
Oh my God. Art is life. Art is everything. Art is creativity. Art is self-expression.
Tell me the story of baby Stephanie. Like, what is your upbringing like? What's your childhood life like? And how does that evolve into the artist?
I was the oldest of five, and my mother was an inspector at Philip Morris, and she worked the third shift. So the second shift, and she was never home much. So we just kind of ran wild. Um, and I think that was good for me because it gave me an opportunity to feel what freedom feels like and what it feels like to be allowed to be a self-thinker. And I have always been a leader. I've always been very competitive, and I've always been inquisitive. And I think that's the thing that drove me to my passion with art.
What was the journey from school? Well, first, let me ask, like, what did you want to be when you grow up? What was that journey from becoming that person to being the gallerist?
I think I've been a whole bunch of different people. My passion has always been the creative arts. When I went to school and I got a degree in journalism from San Francisco State University. And at that time, all I wanted to do was tell stories with words. But later on, after being exposed to more artwork, I wanted to tell stories or help people to be able to tell stories with pictures. So my journey has been a jagged one. And I always feel like in this life, you have so many opportunities. So why spend it doing the same thing every day? So I kind of break my life up into segments. I was a reporter for a while. Then I owned an art gallery for a while. Now I do digital marketing and I travel and I'm thinking about dealing art internationally. So who knows what it'll be next? But I know that we have so much that we have available to do. And I just don't want to. I know that art has this little art and storytelling. It has that plumb line through everything that I've done, but I like to do it in different ways. People often ask me, "Oh, you should open up a gallery. Why do you want to do that again?" And I love art, and I love helping people to select beautiful artwork for their homes. But when I closed my gallery, I had been open for about 18 years, and I left nothing on the table. There was not one more exhibit I wanted to do. There was nothing else I wanted to say. It was done. It was completed. Now, I do want to do art in a different way. And right now, I'm trying to find out what that different way looks like. Um, and I really like the idea of promoting international artists or bringing international artists to America.
You mentioned being a journalist
Mhm.
with the Dallas Morning News. How long were you there, and what was that part of your chapter? I mean, that part of your journey like?
I loved it at the time, and I think it was a camaraderie. I came into the newsroom at a time when newsroom were purposely trying to bring African American reporters in to tell the African American story in major cities. And at the time, the newsroom was filled with all these talented Black people, and I loved it. But I started to feel pigeonholed, and I realized that I wanted to do something on my own, because corporate America is very difficult for me. Even now, I work in corporate America, and it's hard. Sometimes I feel like I just don't fit in, and it could be because I'm a creative, or it could be because I'm a free spirit. I don't know which one it is, but when I was younger, I was a lot more adventurous. No was not an option for me. And if you'd have to tell me no in 5 different languages and 100 different times. And I had just gotten tired of being in the newsroom where other reporters, more senior reporters or reporters that were of a different skin color would get the best stories. And, I would always be sent out to cops and shootings and stuff in South Dallas late at night, and I hated it. So I realized that I needed or wanted to open my own business. And I was reading this book that said, when you open a business, it should be something that you love, and even if you didn't get paid for it. And the only thing that I could think of at the time was art. That was the only thing that I loved being around, and it didn't matter whether I was making money off of it or not. So I took $4,000 and rented a space. And the first year I made $100,000. So I said, hey, this is all right. I was in a beautiful environment. I got to meet different people every day, and it was a hip and happening place to be. And then I think it was during a time where Black art was in vogue again. It was in vogue. We were just having the opportunity of seeing ourselves being able to see ourselves on our walls. During the time the Cosby Show and all that happened. But before that, we were having to have little white girls, pictures of white girls in the meadows and all that kind of stuff. And or the Lord's Supper that was white, And I think I came at a good time where people, I think it was a little bit after the Rodney King thing, and people were like, you know what? It's a new day. And I want to see myself, and I want artwork that looks like me.
You open a gallery, and it is in a time of the Black reawakening, Black empowerment. So tell me the timeline. What year is it that you decide, like, all right, I'm leaving Dallas Morning News. We're going to open this gallery. Where do you open the gallery? What was that first year like? How did you go from $4,000 to $100,000?
I didn't leave the Dallas Morning News on good terms. I have always struggled in corporate America because I speak my mind, and I am a creative, and I am a disruptor. If I see things are not right, I want, hey, let's do this right. Let's do this differently. So, I think that's my nature, to be a change agent and then to challenge authority, and that's not good in corporate America. So anyway, it was during a time of political upheaval for African Americans, and they didn't like the tone of my story. They said I was practicing advocacy journalism, which means that you just come to the story with a perspective that's not a white perspective. So anyway, they gave me a lot of grief for that, and they were bringing the heat. They were changing my schedule and doing a bunch of stuff. So anyway, I went out on a stress leave, and I asked my doctor. I said, hey, can I? I've started this business, and they knew I had started the business because I was in the newspaper and I was on TV and all that, but they couldn't say anything about it because I came to work every day. So I asked my doctor, who wrote this little stress thing, I said, can I work in my gallery? He said, does it stress you out? I said, no, it makes me happy. He said, that's the goal. We want you to be happy, so go work in your gallery. So I was still a reporter at the Morning News, and I had my art gallery. So I went out on a stress leave, and I was only supposed to be out about 6 weeks or whatever, but it felt so good. And I was like, I can never go back in that environment again. When you've been free and you're creating, and then to be able, I just couldn't make myself go back. Every time I thought about going back, I'd start crying. And then I was like, whatever they have to do to me, they just have to do to me. I'm not going back. So they would call me and say, when are you coming back? And I would say, don't call me. Don't call me anymore. Whatever y'all got to do, y'all got to do. So what they did was, they were smart. They made me an inactive employee, and they started sending me business. They started sending me framing and stuff like that. So I guess they wanted to keep me out. So it worked out for the both of us. But the thing that being a reporter did for me is it taught me how to access resources and how to think. So what I would do is I would call around and I would get some of the best artists at the time on the phone and ask them to come and show in my gallery. And they would always do it. And I was always so amazed by that. And I would, and I knew how to market because I was in the media, and I had a lot of friends who were still in TV and were reporters, and they would always do stories and stuff about me and the things that I was doing. So while we didn't have the internet back then, I sure did blow up TV and papers and magazines and all that kind of stuff, and that helped me to keep a constant flow of business. But it was touch and go. There would be, because I was new to business. I didn't understand balance sheets and all that kind of stuff. I was just kind of winging it. So sometimes it was feast, and then other times it would be famine. I'd have tons of money, and other times I'd be dead busted.
So what year was it that you opened the first gallery, and where?
I opened the first gallery in 1990, and it was on Park Lane, between Greenville Avenue and Park Lane. Right, they used to call it 3 Point, where all the streets intersect. Fair Oaks, Park Lane, and some other street, yeah. But it was in North Dallas.
What was Dallas like at that time?
Dallas was polarized at that time. That was when there were police shootings and a bunch of other stuff. And then there was an emerging black middle class. A lot of black professionals were coming to the city with J.C. Penney's and Frito-Lay. They were bringing in people from New York. So it was just this whole nother class of young black professionals that had money.
And so you were saying like the city was polarized at that time. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, that was during the time when, before that time, we had a single member district, which means that you could have a city council person that lived in North Dallas, but they were representing South Dallas. So Roy Williams and Marvin Crenshaw started, they sued the city of Dallas and said that this is not fair because there is not legitimate representation in minority communities. And the courts agreed with them, so they changed the system of government to a 14-1. But before that, you had, I think you only had 2 black districts, and Diane Ragsdale and I can't even remember, Al Lipscomb. They were the city council people at the time, and I was a reporter then when it first started, and they were down there. I mean, it was fun going to city council meetings because they would be down there just raising hell, and they were not trying to be politically correct. They would just call it like it was, and they would just make a lot of noise. And even though they were a little wild with it, it was emboldening. You know, I was like, okay, change is coming to the city, because people often talk about how Dallas missed the civil rights movement, but and because of that, it makes the people who live here, or the African Americans or whatever, a little bit more passive than people, let's say, on the East Coast. But during that time, they brought the heat. You know, they brought the heat. And the city government did change, and then we did get more representation out south. It took a minute, but you could feel the energy.
What do you think led to that big boom? Because I know that Dallas was a conservative city. Like, I was born in '85, so I wasn't completely aware of everything. But I do remember that my childhood was very different from the Dallas that is existing right now. And I remember that the Dallas that people described when I would leave and go to other cities, they'd be like, oh, this little western town, this hick town. They would bring up the, what was it, like a soap opera or a TV show called Dallas?
Yeah.
And that's how people thought of the city.
Yeah.
What do you think led to the big shift from just kind of being like the conservative, white-based city to this big boom that happened in the 90s where there's black galleries, black representative, black restaurants? Yeah. What happened?
I think that it was time, and then you had a lot of influx from people from the East Coast and other places where things were happening. And then I think people just became more emboldened over time. And you get tired. You know, we saw the Rodney King beating. We saw what happened. And I think things are cyclical. it was just time. It was time, and people were no longer afraid. And then you had different voices out there. You had the Dallas Weekly and all those other newspapers that were vigilant about telling our stories. And then the Dallas Morning News made a mistake by bringing us into the newsroom. Me, Lawrence Young, Judy Howard, Tony Joseph, people that identified with the community. You know, we were not code switchers back then. We came and we were true to who we were. And because it was a group of us, we felt insulated from having to code switch or leave the real us outside the door when we came to work. We just, we were coded or connected together so that we could be strong and do what we needed to do for the communities that we served.
So you opened your gallery in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
How long does the gallery exist?
Wow, the gallery existed until 2007 or 8. And it had a couple of different iterations. I started on Park Lane. I stayed there a couple of years and outgrew that space. That space was 1,500 square feet. Then I moved onto Greenville Avenue, Greenville and Park Lane, onto the big Greenville Avenue. And I opened a 7,000 square foot gallery. And then can't remember whether it was a recession or something hit, but my rent at the time was $7,000 a month, and it was a beat down. And I had a staff, and it was a lot. I think my burn rate might have been $25,000 a month, and it was a lot to deal with. And I still had my bills and stuff at home. I was always I had business on my mind. Or like Snoop says, I had my mind on my money and my money on my mind. So it was hard work. It was hard work. And then after that, I opened, during the time I was in North Dallas, I opened another store in Plano, downtown Plano, and had that for a while. And then I think something happened. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, I decided that the times were changing. And before, my gallery name was Stephanie's Collection of African American Art. And then, and that is when I sold predominantly African American images by African American artists. But people's taste started to be a little bit more sophisticated, and they wanted abstracts, and they wanted Black images, but they also wanted other stuff too. So I've been really good about seeing trends. So I decided that it was time to cut my overhead and then go in a different direction. So during that time, I moved down to Deep Ellum, and I found a cute little space that had brick walls and hardwood floors and tin ceilings and everything. And I changed the gallery name from Stephanie's Collection of African American Art to Stephanie Ward Gallery. And I started selling contemporary abstracts by local artists, but I would mix some prints and stuff in there for my old customers. And my goal at the time was to teach people how to collect art and teach them about the secondary market and to teach them how to support local artists. So people who started with me and who were buying a $25 print and they were framing it with a $300-400 frame, I was able to introduce them to the next level of collecting. And before I closed my gallery, they were well on their way with spending $4,000 or $5,000 on an original piece of artwork. So I was really glad about that.
How did you build your knowledge base, and who are some of the people who helped to educate you?
Mm-hmm. I was learning on the fly, and the people that helped me were artists that would come in there because they got a big kick out of put me in my place. But it worked out because I learned. There was Othello Beck, there was Frank Frazier, there was J.D. Evans, and a lot of them would just come by, and criticize, but they would tell me, there was Pancho Brown, Gilbert Young, LaShawn Beal, all those guys. They would exhibit in my gallery, and we'd go to dinner or whatever, and it was always a lesson in art education. They would tell me who the up-and-coming artists were. They would tell me why a piece of artwork was good, who to watch out for, who to push, and they taught me the game. The artists that were already there, because like I said, I had my background was in journalism. I knew nothing about art. The day I opened my gallery, I didn't even know where to get art from. So but like I said, as a reporter, I learned how to access information, and I was very good at asking questions. I didn't mind being, the dumbest one in the room because it paid off. And when I would learn something, I would pass that on to my customers.
Were there Black women in the arts or otherwise who helped to pave the way for you?
Mm-hmm. I would say so. I think Sandra Blackwell was one of them. She was selling art out of her home in Plano, and somebody told me about her, and she was gracious enough to invite me over for tea, and she showed me all of her artwork, and I ended up buying some of it. But anytime I had a question or needed to figure out where to get some artwork from, because Burnett Honeywood was big during that time, and she would always be gracious enough to give me the contact information, even though we were competitors in a sense. She shared information. And because people like her treated me like that, when other young women would come along and they wanted to do what I was doing, I felt compelled to offer them the same thing that people had offered me. The entire time that I had my business, I got nothing but support and, yeah, nothing but support from people that worked, in the city, Black women and men. This city, they rallied around me. I can honestly say that. When people say Black people don't support each other, that was not my experience. I mean, I felt overly supported. J.C. Penney's did a catalog with the Black art, and it was called Stephanie's Collection. And they gave me like 4 or 5 pages in a catalog, and they sold art for me. And that wasn't, I didn't reach out to them. It was some Black employee that worked at J.C. Penney that went and told them about me, and that J.C. Penney, the corporation, came to me. So it wasn't because I was so fantastic or anything like that. It was because of the God's favor and people in the community who saw what I was doing and saw that I was trying to be excellent as best I could. And they went on and they felt comfortable enough to share uh, the information they had about me with their employer.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Hearing that, I feel mixed, right? Like on the one hand, I'm like, wow, what was that like? Because I mean, I do feel that today there are still people who support in that way, but I don't hear it as often. And that leads me to be curious about like what shifted from that period of time to present. I have some ideas, but while I do believe that there's still some level of pride in
Mhm.
Blackness, I don't know that I always see the same level of ground organization and support. I see advocacy. Like, I do see people saying, like, Black Lives Matters, we should be proud. I see advocacy.
Good
But
point.
what you're talking about is something, it's even beyond organizing.
Yeah.
You're talking about like concrete, tangible
Yeah.
support.
Yeah. Good
And I'm
point.
curious about like if you have thoughts. And if you don't, you just be like, girl, I don't know. But I'm curious about like why culture was that way at that time and what may have shifted to where like the tangible support that you're speaking of, somebody who speaks on your behalf when you're not even in the room,
Mhm.
where did that go?
I think that there was a sense of pride because I cannot count the times when people would come into my gallery and say, "I'm so proud of you." And it was people who didn't even know me. "I'm so glad you're here." And what they would do is they would go and tell everybody at their church, and whole churches and stuff would come in because I was doing something different. Because people initially, there were people who said, "Oh, what, are you crazy? You're going to open a Black art gallery in North Dallas? You will be out of business in 30 days." Um, but it was people they were glad that I had taken the chance. They were glad that I was there, and they wanted me to stay there because I was doing something that made them feel good. They saw images of themselves. They could come into my gallery. There was always cake and wine on the weekends. And so many people have met their husband and wives or made connections. It was a community. It was a beautiful setting with beautiful art. Beautiful men and women would come in there and meet each other. And I just made it feel like home. My family is from Tennessee. We just down home folks. So even though, art could be considered a highbrow thing, that's not my personality. So I made my gallery home to a lot of people, and I think they appreciated that. And they felt like it was their place too. And they felt like my success was their success. Yeah, it wasn't a lot of competition. Even the other galleries in the city, if one of us needed a print or something, we could call and say, hey, you got this? And they're like, yeah, come get it. So if they were being competitive, I didn't know it. And if my framer quit or whatever, I could take stuff down to Ebony Art Gallery in Oak Cliff and get Adron to do the work for me. And he would leave enough profit in there so that I could make some money too.
Are there any people or points of history that my generation or younger should know about, specifically Black women who paved the way for us today in the arts or otherwise?
I like Annie Lee. I met Annie Lee. She came here and lived here for a while, and she did a lot with folk art. I like Clementine Hunter. I love Evita Tiziano. There were Bernice. Bernice is dead now, but Bernice, what was Bernice? Montgomery. It was just so many women. Gwen was her name. Gwen, I can't remember Gwen's last name, but they were out there doing art. It was very difficult for women to do art before because they would have children and people didn't consider them artists like they might have an Othello Beck or whatever. But it was people like Judy Frazier that made a Frank Frazier, allowed Frank Frazier to go and do what he did. So yeah, there are a lot of women who, even though, it was difficult for women, they still said, I'm going to be an artist and I'm going to be a full-time artist. And they did it, even though that wasn't something that was really a profession, especially for a Black woman. They were out there, and they've been out there for a long time. The Evita, she's finally reaching her stride right now, but she was out there. She would come to my gallery. Johnny's Parker, she recently died. One of my other favorites, I see her face. She moved to Mexico for a while. Oh gosh, did woodcuts. I can't think of her name, but all those women who say yes, I can. That were doing art 20, 30 years ago when it wasn't a thing. Hats off. I salute them. And people need to Google them and follow them or whatever and find out who they are.
When you think about being a Black woman and the experience that you have in this particular body, how does that impact the way in which you walk through the world, and particularly the way in which you decided to lead your gallery and yourself as an artist? Because I actually didn't ask a whole bunch of questions about your artwork, but I do see a theme. So I want to ask about that. What is it about Black womanhood that inspires you, maybe even frustrates you, but has a clear impact on your art and pathways and leadership?
That's a good question. I think because people don't expect a lot from Black women a lot of times. I like that. It reminds me of like the spook who sat by the door. You're just unassuming, and because they are not watching for you or they're not expecting great things from you, then you have an opportunity to go unencumbered and do whatever it is you want to do. And because we know what people think of us and we know what the challenge is ahead, we go hard. And because we go hard, I think that's what makes us great. Because we know we got to work hard. We know we got to show up. So a lot of times we overdo it. We go hard. And we need to continue going hard. I wish that I could say, oh, no, you don't have to go hard. You don't have to do this. You don't have to be better. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Because otherwise, People are always trying to marginalize you or trying to put you in a box, but just don't let them. Make sure you're seen. Make sure you're seen, but be excellent at your craft. Be excellent. And whatever it is that makes you feel most alive, do that. Do that. Do not follow the money. Because if you do what makes you feel most alive, the money will come. Art was a thing I loved, and I've made the most money I've ever made in my life doing my artwork or selling art or whatever. So don't follow the money, follow your heart, follow your love, and do what you were made to do. God put us on this earth for a purpose, and it wasn't to get a check.
That's a beautiful answer. What advice would you give to Black women artists or enthusiasts in Dallas about navigating the challenges they might face in attempting to achieve in Dallas?
Work together. Find your crew and be open and honest about what you need. Don't be a superwoman. Continue to learn all that you can. Expose yourself to as much as you can and travel and have an open mind. And just be open. But the main thing is surround yourself with creatives, people that are not afraid, people that don't mind challenging the status quo and bending the lines.
When you think about the impact of the 70 Board Gallery, what would you say it was?
I hope that I left a legacy of learning and creativity. I hope that I introduced people to art that never would have considered it before. I hope that I created an environment or an experience where people could meet other people and be free and feel at home. And there were a lot of young artists that I met along the way. And I often laugh when I meet them years later and they tell me what I said to them, because I'm surprised I said anything of value. But I just hope that I have said something that inspired somebody to do something great and to inspire other people and kind of keep the chain going. I never feel like my contribution is enough. I never feel like I'm doing enough, and I always want to do more. And I just hope that I have an opportunity to do more before my time is up on this earth.